Simon, the YouTuber, decided to buy a Toyota Supra. The new 2020 model had taken a hit, not a huge crash, but there were plenty of problems. Before we start this repair journey, if this is your first time watching, subscribe to the channel. Let's go. To begin, the Supra they bought wasn't running. It had mechanical faults and wouldn't crank at all. They prepared a forklift so it would be ready as soon as the car arrived. The trailer did arrive. There were several cars on it, including their Supra. They moved it with the forklift and lowered it to the ground. They liked the car even in this damaged state. The rear was the most intact area, so they covered it with plastic to protect it while they moved the car into the garage. Then they removed the plastic to check the real damage. The Supra's engine is a six-cylinder, 3.0-liter turbo making about 335 horsepower and nearly 500 newton-meters of torque. As you probably know, this platform is BMW-sourced. The one they had was the GR model, not the regular one. The GR is the launch edition, a special limited release. Most differences are cosmetic. The engines are the same between the versions. The twin exhaust gives an aggressive look, and the diffuser even has little brake light pods that light with the brakes. They inspected the wheels and brakes. The rear brakes looked like brushed aluminum, and the matte black rims looked great. At the front, the big brake calipers had 4 pistons. They weren't sure if they were Brembo, and the car has many ventilation openings, some of which are purely decorative. For example, a large-looking side vent is only for looks and doesn't actually cool the brakes. There were also fake vents at the rear and some real vents in the front bumper. The main impact was concentrated at the front, especially the right side. They tried to open the hood but couldn't at first. The crash wasn't massive, but it could have severed wires, damaged the fuse box, or even destroyed the battery, which would explain why the car wouldn't crank. Part of the suspension was bent, which might be due to a damaged steering linkage. The wheel itself looked fine, but the suspension components were damaged. The side door had minor damage, while the entire rear was basically fine, only light scratches. Inside, the seats were in good condition, but dusty. All airbags were open, deployed, and, after some attempts, they decided to try to open the hood to check engine damage. First thing they noticed, the radiator support was broken. The car had 2 front crash absorption zones, a design advantage because the crash didn't reach the radiator support directly. They considered replacing the hood with a carbon fiber one that might have real ventilation openings. Back inside the car, they checked for electrical power. But unfortunately, there was no power at all. They couldn't even read the mileage since the car had no electricity. They cleaned and washed the car thoroughly to inspect the paint and any additional body damage. After a good soap and rinse, they removed some scratches and found the paint after cleaning was generally in excellent condition. But once they washed it, some new rear damage showed that hadn't been visible before. The rear diffuser had some internal damage and a cluster of scratches in that area. They removed the airbags inside, cleared the dust, polished the dash and seats, and tried to find the battery. They suspected the battery might be in the rear storage area, but the Supra's trunk opens electrically. With no power, they couldn't open it manually. They checked the owner's manual to see if there was a manual trunk release, and unexpectedly, they managed to open the trunk. Under the lid was the battery cover. They removed the cover and found the battery outside the car. Someone had taken it out for inspection. They used a battery tester that should provide a charge, but the tester didn't give any reading. The battery was completely dead. So they bought a new battery and installed it. Immediately, the car's electronics came to life. They were excited. Seats started moving. Dashboard lights lit up. They took the key and tried to start the car to read the odometer, but the attempt failed. They tried again. Brake pedal plus start button. Still no response. This surprised them because they assumed everything would be fixed after swapping the battery. They checked the engine oil level. There was no traditional dipstick. Some sports cars show oil level on the screen and repeatedly tried to start the car. An error message appeared on the screen. After some tries, the display finally showed data. The odometer read 2,460 miles, extremely low for a 2020 model. Then they discovered the main reason the car wouldn't start. The airbag fuse, often called the Pyro fuse in previous videos, located next to the battery and linked to the airbag system, had melted in the crash. That fuse had burned out and cut power to the car's systems, preventing it from cranking. To provide power without the blown fuse, just to test, and the car immediately started. Music plays as they rushed to the hood and heard the engine, but it had strange sounds and issues. The stock exhaust looked original. They planned to replace it later to get a louder tone. They lifted the Supra and removed the upper fender cover. That area includes a reinforcement near the wheel made from aluminum, fastened with special bolts, showing lightweight but strong materials. The radiator support was aluminum too, and bolts off easily, which gave them hope for straightforward repairs. Their main worry was that the impact might have bent the chassis. If so, repairs would be very difficult and expensive. They planned to replace the hood and some front parts with carbon fiber later, but realized mixing carbon parts with stock panels would look mismatched for now. So they decided to keep most of the front in stock look, maybe use carbon for just the side skirts, or a few accents to keep the look balanced. They removed the front bumper using a wheel lock to remove the front wheels and access the bumper bolts, then removed the inner wheel liners and lights. The headlamp assembly was huge, complex design and not cheap, roughly $1,200 for a light, and it included water cooling and 2 air vents, which are important for engine cooling. They also found a small duct to cool the brakes. The subframe for the suspension was aluminum, a key component to keep weight down and boost performance. Unfortunately, a line was forced into that area, which caused the front wheel to tilt inward. The suspension design is somewhat complex, a shock that holds the joint from above, and 2 control arms below. There was an AC condenser leak, so they removed all front components. Next step was removing the radiator. First the fan shroud, then the front aluminum crossbars that hold the radiator. The radiator support was broken in 2, and the coolers themselves were slightly bent, but could be straightened. They worked to correct the heavily inward-tilted front wheel. That process required a hydraulic press and hammers to reposition a stuck control arm pivot. They reassembled and installed the wheel, lowered the car, and tested. The wheel wasn't perfectly straight, but much improved. A small camber remained which would slightly affect performance during acceleration. Back in the shop, they raised the car again. The leak was from a tiny hole. They took it to a nearby shop specializing in welding radiators, hoping to repair rather than buy a new radiator. They asked for a pressure test to ensure no further leaks would appear. They discovered the Supra has 2 separate cooling circuits, and one of the coolant reservoirs was completely empty. They bought green coolant from the parts shop and refilled the empty tank. The radiator shop repaired the radiator and passed the pressure test, saving the team the cost of a brand new radiator. They installed the repaired unit, refilled the cooling system, and used a vacuum pump to remove air from the hoses, an important step to ensure efficient cooling. They ran the car and let temperature rise to check that the fans would engage and that there were no leaks, the most important check for them. They had ordered replacement parts from the dealer and focused on repairing the broken upper radiator support. The cracked parts had to be fixed carefully because when they installed the new support, Everything must align precisely. They tightened the damaged area about a quarter-inch forward to restore perfect body alignment. They used a lift and pulled the structure with chains until bolt holes matched exactly. Then they opened the boxes with new parts, clips and new mounts to place the radiator properly, and the front bumper, which was in two pieces, an outer cover and an internal frame, almost like a Lamborghini-style bumper. The old internal frame had cracks, so they bought a new inner frame. They adjusted hood, fenders, and doors to make sure everything lined up. They noticed a large gap between the headlamps and bumper, and between the hood and those parts. But these were relatively easy fixes. The priority was finishing the tough structural repairs. The rest was less complicated. They ordered some dealer parts like bumper mounts and waited for parts to arrive while prepping the car for new paint. They found a small aluminum dent and brought tools to fix it. They treated the scratch with a product called Short-Cut SAV, a strong, water-resistant, fiber-reinforced filler designed for strong metals like aluminum. It needed a short time to cure. Before applying more filler or primer, they realized they had run out of 320 grit sandpaper, so they bought all the supplies they needed again, plus a full set of paint for the car's body. They planned to repaint over roughly 60% of the Supra's body in a color they chose called Nocturnal Black, and tracked down matching materials. They bought 3 cans of paint from the brand Sandox, a high-quality product that blends well with the original paint. Along with the missing 320 grit sandpaper, a new black primer that can be sanded after curing, cloths, and other sandpaper. They prepped the surrounding area, sprayed primer, then a light gray primer layer to check how much sanding was needed. They removed the hood and sanded the entire hood and fenders, using scuff pads to speed sanding. To save effort, they planned to spray those parts at a professional paint shop. Better equipment and easier masking. So they'd only do final prep and deliver parts to the pro shop. This would save them the huge job of masking the entire car. They worked on the doors, blending the new paint with the existing paint. They removed door components like mirrors and handles, planning to remove interior panels because airbag modules and seat belt hardware were present. They stripped door trims from the inside and prepared them for painting. They took the hood and fender in their truck to the paint shop and unloaded everything. The ambient temperature was ideal, ensuring the paint would cure properly. The paint shop mixed the base coat and applied a protective clear layer. Important to add gloss and protect from chips and weather. The parts came out smooth and free of defects. They considered painting more parts at the shop, so everything would match perfectly, and decided to come back the next day to spray the rest. They left the parts in sunlight to cure completely, then returned to the car to continue work. Back at the shop, they sanded the doors wet with soap and water, wet sanding, to eliminate imperfections. The result? Very smooth doors. They repeated the same process for the other door. They'd previously applied a primer over a small damaged area, but it was too thick and difficult to sand. They used 2 sheets of sandpaper to level that small area. They discovered the primer used earlier wasn't actually automotive primer. It was craft hobby primer, which explained tiny pinholes, and the instructions revealing it wasn't automotive grade. To avoid paint problems, they sprayed a proper automotive primer over that area and resumed sanding the rest of the panels. They sanded the hood, front bumper, and doors, removing contaminants and oil from surfaces to prepare for transfer to the paint shop. They masked the car with tape and cover sheets to protect the parts that wouldn't be painted. The Supra is generally hard to mask because of many vents in doors and openings that need to be sealed with foam tape to prevent overspray entering the windows. After masking, they cleaned the paint surfaces with a degreaser, loaded the paint gun, and sprayed the first base coat, applying 3 passes of base and a very light coat to keep the finish smooth. The Sandox base performed excellently and gave them the result they wanted. They sprayed the final clear coat and left the parts to dry for about 8 hours. The next day, they inspected the paint. The doors and bumper were smooth with no issues, but there were slightly rough patches on the hood, likely due to higher temperature inside the booth. The important thing? No dust or bugs in the finish, which makes polishing much easier. They removed the masking and put the car out in the sun to check the final color. They loved the new color. It had a subtle green metallic sheen on the metal flakes. They temporarily installed the bumper to see how the car looked. Everything seemed in order apart from those rough spots that would be easy to polish. They loaded the car back onto the trailer and took it to the dealership to pick up ordered parts, then to a detailing and customization center where parts were stored. They received some of the parts they'd been waiting for, not everything yet, including the right inner fender and the new internal structure for the front bumper so they could fit it all. Other deliveries included a cooling duct, Toyota emblem, headlight bulb, a DRL LED, and finally, a control module. These parts were pricey, roughly $200 each for many items, $300 for the LED DRL, and $500 for the computer module. The airbags module wasn't available yet and would arrive later. To prepare for polishing, they wet sanded the hood using 2,500 grit paper. The paint was already smooth, so the job went fast. They planned to use 3,000 grit later, but postponed it. They sanded the remaining parts except the front bumper, still deciding whether to polish it with the car or leave it as is. Before polishing, they planned to buy a new wool polishing pad. The old pad from previous projects had hardened and could cause circular swirl marks. Buying a fresh pad would be better. They started polishing the sanded panels, and the finish became glass smooth, but the pad they used had some circular marks, and the paint looked a little dull from certain angles. They used a clay bar to deepen the color and remove any overspray particles from painting. The final result was excellent. Next, they reinstalled the bumper, including the original front lip, wiring harness, and sensors for the area's speed sensor, making the front bumper complete. They needed to adjust the front camera alignment, which had several misalignments. They lifted the car and removed the front wheels, bumper, and lights. They tried to clean and repair the old corroded control module. The main problem was a missing computer. They retrieved a rusty old module and attempted to clean it with anti-rust tools, but it was beyond repair and effectively burned out. They tested the headlight on the other side and found it worked, confirming the headlight computer was dead and needed replacement. After spending hours tuning the front end and aligning the gaps, they installed inner liners, door handles, and door trims, everything they had removed, and tested the seat belts. The belts worked fine. Then they took the Supra for its first drive since purchase. They remembered the car was stuck in a low-power limp mode, which limited output. Before testing, they used a diagnostic tool to clear the error codes. They tried to drive, but it still ran in low-power mode, only doing about 5 miles per hour. They took the car to a friend with a better diagnostic scanner to clear the codes. Unfortunately, the friend's computer returned random, unrelated codes and couldn't reach the car's central computer. They contacted 2 others with more advanced scanners that can connect to modern cars like BMW-sourced systems. They discovered the more advanced scanner cost about $3,500 and could interface with 2020 models. Despite the investment and trying the device, it still couldn't access this particular car. So the only solution was to take it to a dealer to clear the codes. Meanwhile, a full Armytrix exhaust system had arrived. They opened the box and inspected the muffler. It included the downpipe connection and piping. The system had valves to control sound, and the burnt blue tips gave it a dramatic look, chosen for aesthetics. They knew they couldn't install it until they resolved the error code issue. They also opened a second box with a carbon fiber splitter from a company called Street Hunter. All